I have a lot of conversations, especially with UX designers who say like, gosh, it feels so oversaturated. Like, is UX design even worth it? Like, should I even get into it? First of all, if your heart's not in it, then like, if your heart's not in anything, don't go for it, right? Like, that's just it. Like things aren't easy. It's taken me a long time to get to where I am today. And I have so much more learning and growing and evolving to do. Like, I still feel like a noob,
Hola, and welcome to episode 21 of Latinx Who Design. I am your host, Michelle Ferreira, a Brazilian designer living in Sydney, Australia. Thank you so much for listening. Our goal in the podcast is to highlight Latinx designers from all backgrounds, shapes, colors, and sizes, sharing their stories and struggles to inspire the next generation of designers. This podcast is made for you, so if you have any questions, send them over. This week, unfortunately, we had some Zoom issues and the audio is going to break in a couple of sections, but I had the amazing pleasure of chatting with Rachel Smith. Rachel is a Latinx designer and founder of Design to Combat COVID-19, a virtual community of creatives over 2,000 strong who volunteer their skills and time to support underrepresented communities affected by the pandemic. By day, Rachel Smith is a product designer at Facebook and was this year's 2021 lead mentor with the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. Previously, she worked with companies such as Nordstrom and the Home Depot. The rest of the time, the LA native works on a range of creative projects, both within her local and global communities. And now, Rachel Smith. Hi, Rachel.
Hey, Michelle, how's it going?
I'm doing good. And yourself?
I'm doing so great. Super excited to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Nice. Thank you. And thank you for joining. My computer stopped working, Rachel. I don't know what's happening.
Oh, no. Okay.
Oh, okay. No worries. It's back. My camera stopped for some reason. I know what it is. It's Illustrator. And that's where you keep everything in and you just go like, that's fun because you're a designer. Illustrator was open and it broke the Zoom call. Rachel, could you tell me where you're calling from?
Sure. Yeah. I am currently located in Los Angeles, California.
Nice. Do you mind if I ask in which area of Los Angeles? I actually lived close by before.
Yeah. So it's funny. I say Los Angeles for global folks because like on a map, if you were to look, it's very Los Angeles, but I actually am in Whittier, California. It's on the borderline of Orange County, LA County, in the suburbs. I grew up here. I left for 10 years. I came back just to be closer to family. So it's been really nice. But yes, I'm located in Whittier.
Nice. And so you said that that's where you're actually from?
Yeah, I was born and raised here. I left for about 10 years. I made a couple stints around Portland, Oregon. I went to San Diego State University. San Diego was super fun to live. Not only is it gorgeous, but Tijuana is like right there. So we'd go over the border and like go surfing every weekend. It was incredible. Yeah. And then I lived in Texas for about 6 years. But being the good Mexican-American daughter that I am, I had to come back for family's sake. And once we decided to have our own family, be close to my mom and my cousins, and they got mad at me for missing all the quinces. So had to be here. And back,
so I was going to ask back in Whittier. I was going to ask exactly that. So you are Latina and you are from a Mexican family, but again, your name, Rachel Smith. It's really surprising, I guess, to say like, "Hi, I'm a Latina."
Yes. So half Mexican, half Caucasian. So Mexican American fully. My mom's from Leon, Guanajuato. My dad's from Whittier as well. And it's funny. I kind of had this conversation with lots of folks who are half as well, where they kind of have this identity crisis where it's like, the Caucasian side of my family is like, oh, you must like be super Mexican when all the things that you do, like just go ahead and sing all the songs in Spanish. And then a Mexican side of the family, they're like, oh, this wet, I doesn't know what the heck she's talking about. So it's like, you got to find your people and just know that like you are who you are. I'm American through and through. And yeah, I'm Mexican American and I'm proud of it. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's so cool. I love it. I also, you mentioned there San Diego, and I noticed that you went for Fullerton College for graphic design. So yep. I'm going to ask you, how did you get into design? Yeah. How did you decide to go for this profession?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of had a non-traditional path. I knew I always was a creative. I loved drawing, and, my dad was a musician. My mom was a painter in her spare time. So I was really lucky to be in a household where they encourage like creative expression. So, and I really took to it too. I'm not saying like my parents pushed on me or anything. I was like, it was fun for me. Right. And, yeah. So, growing up in the neighborhood that I did, we had a lot of folks who were really into music, specifically like underground, like punk rock, and they were all in bands. So we'd go to shows on the weekends. And then, sometimes randomly a friend would hit me up on AOL Instant Messenger, like back in the day, because I'm an elder millennial and that's how I used to communicate, and be like, hey, like we have a show coming up. Can you do a flyer? And I hate to admit this, but, some of my first graphic design programs were like pirated versions of like Photoshop 3 or whatever. And I'd be like, sure, I got this random like, floppy or, CD, like, let me just whip up something for you. And I found that I really enjoyed that. I loved the community aspect and being able to make really cool graphics or posters for friends for their shows. And, I took on to that for a while. And, so I went to local community colleges because legitimately that's all I could afford. And, my parents did what they could for me. But at the end of the day, I was an only child. I was kind of finding my way. I didn't come from an affluent neighborhood. I just kind of like figured things out. And so I went to these community colleges in the Los Angeles and Orange County surrounding communities, and really took on to my professors as mentors. Like, I legitimately would make friends with my professors and be like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Do you have any guidance? And they'd be like, yeah, like come to my art show or come to X, Y, and Z. And it's funny because, a lot of these professors, when you first start going to community colleges, you're like, oh my gosh, like they're my teacher, but it's not like high school. It's like totally different. And I encourage anyone who's going through, those types of courses at community colleges to just talk to them, because they're just people, and they're probably getting their master's or trying to like throw an art show as well. And they're just people like you and me. But anyways, so they basically encouraged me to like, help with art installations and find my way and give me advice. And it took me a while. I went to community college for like, I'm not going to lie, like 4 years. By the time I was able to transfer, I spent another 2 years at a full-time university, and it wasn't a linear path. There were moments where I was like, is art really going to be my thing? Because at first I thought maybe I'll be a painter, or maybe I'll be like UX design didn't really exist then as a course. I mean, yes, like Human Factors International like coined it like in the 70s, but they used it for like airplane design and things of that nature. But there was never like General Assembly, like, here's your courses to become a UX. Like, no, none of that existed. So, I kind of had to figure out my way. And I went to San Diego State. I majored as a graphic design major, and I had an emphasis in, I believe, like it was art or art history. I don't even remember. But graphic design major. And they told you like old school tactics, like you legitimately had to, learn how to screen print. And my professor, she was like she taught like the Bauhaus design movement, and which is like super awesome as like a traditionalist graphic designer. But yeah, like where I am today versus where I started, not linear whatsoever. So if anyone's feeling discouraged, being like, I don't know how to get to this point, like none of us did. We all are figuring it out, and there's many ways to get to a certain destination. So never compare yourself. Everyone's journey is different.
I love that. Never compare yourself. It's definitely a thing. And it's really hard. It's not easy to do. You're always comparing, right? It's the tools that we use. You go to LinkedIn, you see that, this person is doing this thing. This person is doing that thing. So,
it's overwhelming.
I imagine. Without comparing yourself, I need to ask, I didn't ask this. So what is your role today, and who do you work for?
Yeah, so I'm currently a product designer at Facebook. I just started fairly recently, and I'm working on things that are related to like e-com and shopping. That's been a bit of my background. I've been lucky enough to really love fashion, be good at e-commerce, and the breadth and depth of my product design career has been in e-com and retail. And I even have a small design agency. We're called Your Nice Design, and I've been able to help women with small businesses or minorities with small businesses like get set up on like Shopify stores. And this is like back in the day, but it's really nice to be able to help folks who kind of want to build their own businesses and build their own self in that way and be able to support them. But yeah, Facebook product designer. And that's what I do for my 9 to 5.
That's amazing. And I'm going to ask you this just for curiosity, because of the whole COVID thing I've mentioned before. I'm in Sydney, Australia. We're in the middle of a lockdown. Are you doing remote for Facebook? Is that how this works for you?
Yes, I am fully remote for Facebook.
Nice. That's so cool. I see also that you've worked since last year as the founder and a director for a Design to Combat COVID-19. Would you mind sharing about that a little bit?
Totally. So kind of going back to my roots, I obviously I moved back to my hometown and I'm really, close with community members. And I've always felt like that sense of community growing up. And, when COVID hit last year, I had like an existential crisis is the only thing I could really describe it as, is like, okay, I'm being sent home to work for this company at the time that I was with, a big fashion company here in the United States. And I'm just supposed to like pretend that the world isn't on fire and I'm supposed to make money for the man. Like, this doesn't feel right to me. So I would say we were probably one of the first design groups that started up. And what I did is I purchased a domain. I set up a Squarespace site, like literally within like a few hours. And I was like, Designed to Combat COVID-19. Sure. And I went on Twitter and I said, hey, I'm going to try to do this organization for folks who need help in terms of like pandemic related problems. Anyone who wants to join me can. During that time, I had friends and family members and a lot of creatives, which I'm sure you saw yourself, getting laid off left and right. Nobody knew if they were going to have a job. People were like freaking out. Like, no one knew what was going on. Supply chains weren't able to catch up and giving doctors and nurses supplies that they needed. So I just basically created this space to say, we're creatives. We know how to solve for problems in very ambiguous situations. What can we do to help solve for this? Overnight, I had 100 people join. Within a week, there was 1,000 people. To this day, there's about 2,200 or more globally. We were able to incubate various organizations to help solve for solutions related to the pandemic, specifically around those who have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So those who couldn't get government help, those who were ignored because of X, Y, and Z reasons, or because they were in red line neighborhoods or whatever be the case. And one of the organizations that came out of that was an organization called Mask for Docs, and they were able to distribute over 100,000 pieces of personal protective equipment for free to doctors and nurses worldwide. I launched the site, I believe it was a Monday or a Tuesday, and we had our first delivery of KN95s to a local hospital that Friday, which was incredible. We were able to create chapters like globally around the world. I mean, it was a whirlwind. I mean, I look back on last year and I'm just like, how in the hell did we do what we did so quickly? But it was because we rallied and we didn't know what we were okay with not knowing what was going to be happening. We didn't know what we didn't know, right? And we just tried it. And to like look back and see that, like, that is a perfect environment for a designer. You just throw whatever you can on the wall, see what sticks, iterate, learn, and go from there. But yes, that's the organization we created. They're called Design to Combat COVID-19. And they have, the volunteers are absolutely incredible. I've met such wonderful designers all around the world creating amazing initiatives because of that organization.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good. And I appreciate you sharing it. And I was going to say, if there's anything, anyone out there listening can do to help, how would they help today? Can they still contribute? Again, I'm very mindful of the fact that we are still in lockdown here and that the US right now has a peak of cases. So it's like COVID-19 is not over, right? So we're still dealing with the effects of this long term, and just wondering if there's anything anyone can do to contribute.
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to design2combatcovid19.com. There's a sign up sheet. You can check it out. We also have sister organizations on our site as well, such as Rebuild Black Businesses, Fight Pandemic. So we have informationals if folks want to check that out there. But I mean, absolutely. I mean, my husband, he has family in Sydney and Canberra as well. And I remember like 6 months ago or so, we were WhatsApping and they're like, yeah, everything's back to normal here. Like people are just hanging out. And we in the US were in lockdown. We're like, oh, we're so jealous. And for a minute there, it felt like it flipped, like they were on lockdown. And then we were just like I went to the Hollywood Bowl this summer thinking like, oh my gosh, everything's fine. Like before Delta really started coming around. And like, now you won't catch me dead in public because number one, I'm expecting. Number two, it's just like cases everywhere. But yeah, I mean, we're still in it. There's no going around it. Like we are still in it.
Yeah, we were out of it for almost a year, and again, it's completely shocking how fast it happened, how fast we're back deep into this. People in my team were going to the office. Our office was open.
Yeah.
Right? We've been doing remote because again, everything is remote. But that idea that you can now actually choose to go to the office if you want to, right? So if you're that disappeared really quickly. I'm gonna go to a little lighter side of this.
Sure.
I think this is I think this is an amazing. It's an amazing thing to see. How much was rallied around this very quickly. And again, if you want to get involved, go to design2combatcovid19.com and support. On a lighter note, you started out. You did your college. It was like you said. Fullerton College, San Diego College. These were community colleges.
Yep.
But then from there, you started a whole a long career now. Can you tell us a little bit? Can you tell us a little bit about that? So from that starting point, like you said, there was no UX design back then,
Right.
The title didn't really exist. The courses for UX design didn't really exist. But from there, getting to where you are today, can you drive us a little bit through your story?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was at San Diego State, I was studying traditional graphic design, loved it, got an internship. For anyone who's in college that's thinking like, should I get an internship? Like, absolutely. Like, yes, I believe in paid internships 100%. But I also at the time, took a pro bono job because it was a foot in the door. And I encourage if you have an opportunity to do so, do it because there's nothing better than real life experience on your resume. So I was going to San Diego State. I was in my last year and I was literally applying to any job anywhere. It didn't even have to be in California. And I was lucky enough to receive an offer for a big entertainment / restaurant industry type company based in Houston, Texas. And I'd never even been to Houston before. And I flew out for an interview. They were like, can you come in for an interview tomorrow? And I was like, oh, okay. So I had to borrow money from friends. Be like, can I please? I need to go to this interview. Was lucky enough to fly out, went for the day, got the job. And I was a print designer and my salary was so small, it's laughable, but I took it because it was an opportunity to get my foot in the door. And what I did was I was a traditional, legitimate print designer for this company. They're called Landry's, and they own basically any entertainment / super touristy spot in the US. And actually there's a few spots around globally as well, like Morton's, a steakhouse based in the US, Bubba Shrimp, or what is it? Bubba Gump Shrimp Company from the movie Forrest Gump. They have a restaurant chain here in the US.
I love
Rainforest Cafe. Yeah, right. Rainforest Cafe, Golden Nugget, anything that's Vegas-y type or really touristy, that's them. So I got to do billboards and menus. And honestly, it was a blast. I had so much fun driving around Houston, seeing my billboard and being like, whoa, that's my life. That's so cool. But however, I will say that being a production designer for me personally, I was getting burnt out on a craft that I really loved. I love print design. I love tactile design. I love screen printing. It's so fun. But I was doing 30 or 40 different pieces a day, and I was just getting burnt out very quickly. So knowing that, I thought to myself, okay, this is cool. I'm super stoked to be here. Texas is awesome. If anyone, people have a lot of opinions about Texas, but Houston was very progressive. Like we had a lesbian mayor. There was folks there who, it's like a transplant city. Like people come for oil and gas industry. People come for arts and design. Mexico's right there. Like it is just a melting pot of different folks. And I think for a while there, it would like surpass New York as like one of the most diverse cities in the world, or in the US, excuse me. Anyways, Houston's awesome. Just shout out to that really quick. But yeah, I taught myself, HTML and CSS. There are incredible resources online put in the door that are free. I used a website called Codecademy, and it actually taught me basic HTML, basic CSS. And I was lucky enough to have a friend who worked for, there's a company out here in the US called the Home Depot, which is basically like home goods that you purchase online. And they had a sister a site in Houston. And they were like, hey, we need a promotion designer. If you know this basic HTML, CSS, can you go ahead and do you want to work here? And I'm like, yeah, for sure. They're like, okay, well, you have to push promotions like 1 a.m. And I'm like, that's fine. Like, I'll take it. Like, So yeah, it was grunt work, but I learned so much so quickly. And what that taught me as a designer is how to work with engineering partners as well. So it's like I was coding, I was doing the design work, I was doing web design, but I was also learning, a little bit of light engineering development as well, or anything of that sort. And so I kind of worked my way up. I was doing promotion design, a little bit of print design. And then I kind of stopped and looked around because I saw some other designers getting together in rooms, and they were talking about user flows and personas and, UI and this word like UX. And I'm like, what is this? And I would talk to my designer friends and say, what are you guys doing over there? And they're like, oh, well, we're UX designers. So I'm like, so you're not staying up till 1 a.m. You get paid double than me. Like, I'll just be real about it, and you're learning all these really cool things and you're getting to experiment and do A/B tests. Like my mind was blown. I had no idea this existed. And I was lucky enough to be in an environment where they encouraged folks who wanted to learn, that they would give them opportunities to do so. So I had a manager and she was like, hey, you're really taking on to this whole thing. You've been here for a while. We offer a stipend to have people have training. Is this something that you'd be interested in? And gosh, I'm so like looking back at it, I was like, well, there was a really big design conference I wanted to go to. And it was between that or the training. And I was like, I want to go to the flashy conference. And she's like, you should probably go to the training. And I'm like, okay, fine. And I'm so freaking glad that I did, because it basically like changed the trajectory of my career. And shout out to Sari, like for pushing me in that direction. Thank you for that, because it just completely shifted my future moving forward. So yeah, I became a UX designer for Home Depot. I got promoted. I moved to Dallas, Texas, and became their cart and checkout designer, UX designer, serving like, I think it was like over 7 million customers like a day. From there, I knew I wanted to move back to Los Angeles. So I applied to come back to work for Nordstrom, which is a big fashion company out here in the States. And I got to work at Nordstrom for a few years, hopped around a bit, and now I'm at Facebook. Sorry, that was like really long-winded, but that's kind of my journey in a nutshell. And what I'm getting at is great. Like, no path is linear. Like, I was figuring it out. Roles are constantly shifting and changing. So don't ever think like if you're trying to break into this career that like you have to fit a certain mold, because as designers, as creatives, like we're all constantly learning and growing as the industry changes. Like it's not the same as it was even 3 years ago. So as long as you come to the table with an open mind and are willing to just like be okay with ambiguity and learning as you go, you're going to be great.
Yeah, I think the one of the great points you made there, I think the modes themselves are changing because the industry is so young, right? You look at cinema, you look at TV, how long that has been around, and then you look at the web, and the web is just in its infancy. Yeah. So,
oh my gosh, absolutely.
Each week, I get to share with all of you great stories from Latinx designers, but none of this would be possible without Anchor.fm. Anchor.fm is a free, easy to use podcast creating tool that allow you to create and edit anything you need for your podcast. It distributes the podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one simple place. If you're interested in making a podcast, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Anchor.fm, thank you for supporting this podcast.
Yeah, I think the one of the great points you made there, I think the modes themselves are changing because the industry is so young, right? You look at cinema, you look at TV, you know how long that has been around, and then you look at the web, and the web is just in its infancy. Yeah. So one of my favorite things, I was looking for your resume, not giving myself off here, but I was looking for your resume, trying to figure out like the path to, like you said, it's not a linear path. But one of the things I think is very interesting, which is a question I get a lot, and I would imagine you probably get a lot too, is you mentioned UX design, and then you mentioned product design, and then it's design director, and then it's design creative, and then there's all these different titles. So for you, that transition from graphic designer, UX designer, product designer, right? Was that ever a holding point where you was like, I don't know, what does this mean? What is a product designer versus a UX designer? Why am I, like what's all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, titles definitely change, and they change with the times as well. Like, I don't think anyone I know is like called a web designer anymore. That was like such a like an early 2000s term. And even I think for a hot moment in my career, I was labeled as like an interaction designer. But it definitely, there are different terms. I saw a really good article on Twitter literally just yesterday breaking down all the different terms. But there are different types of art forms to design. A lot of folks think that if you're a UX designer, you have to know all of the things. And yes, there are umbrella UX designers who are good at visual design, who are good at prototyping, who are good at UI and research, but you don't have to be all those things. Like, I would encourage anyone to find their niche. Like, what is it that you like to do? Do you like to do the research? Do you like to do front end development? Are you really good at UI work? And then go with that. And if it's not, forever, that's okay too. But yeah, I mean, I've had lots of different titles, and there were moments where I'm just like, okay, like, I guess this is the hot new term for a while, and I'm just going to like roll with it. But yeah, I would say product design for me is kind of like that umbrella term, honestly, like being able to understand basics of graphic design, how things look next to each other, like hierarchy and gestalt theory and color theory and all those things. And then, understanding how, UI elements work, and how important it is to have qualitative and quantitative research when it comes to like designs that you're proposing. There's so much that goes into it. And product design is incredible in that way because, you're building for humans. And if humans don't take on to it, then you don't have a product, right? So you kind of have to consider those things. But yeah, I've had many different titles throughout the years. And honestly, some it just kind of goes with the times as well. And you just have to be open and learn, and you'll be fine. So.
But you mentioned something very interesting, which was you also figure out the parts that you like more, and then you go for that one. Find your niche and go to that. I'm going to ask you then. The segue here is, so what part of design do you like more, Rachel?
There's a lot of different aspects that I ask myself that constantly. I mean, I feel like I'm constantly learning and growing, and I would say for me, it's seeing those aha moments in people. So I love like getting that foundational research with like my researchers or my data scientists, and kind of really understanding like a hypothesis or a theory that I'm coming up with, and being like, okay, like, is this going to work? And then you have like, let's say 2 different designs you show somebody, and one doesn't stick and one does. And when it is just so seamless for a user, and they do all the things that you want them to do, like, that's amazing. But there's also those moments where they call out items that you're like, oh my gosh, I never saw that before, or I never would have thought of that. And you're just like, shit, like, oh my gosh, like, I should have totally considered that. So for me, it's like those aha, like researchy type moments. It's really exciting to me. And also just like being creative and like I love getting in there, getting lost in a Figma file or sketch or whatever that it is you use, and just kind of like having fun, getting into that flow state, right? And like just putting on a really good album on Spotify, getting lost in your design for a few hours, and then seeing if it sticks. And yeah, for me, there's lots of different aspects, but it's those aha light bulb moments that like really get me.
Right.
And I'm just like, yes, like that's what I was going for.
That's awesome. So I heard your favorite side of design, and I also heard how you started. But what inspires you to be in design today, in the design industry today?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like, as I mentioned, with my background growing up, that I've always kind of been a creative at heart. And I feel very lucky and fortunate enough to have found my path in that way. I've also, been able to rally tons of folks together to help create social impact and just create impact for the greater good. So for me, it's using, like, personally, I believe as designers, we have a purpose to change people's lives for the better, whether it be to make their lives more efficient or to bring them joy, or just, we're creatives and we have opportunities to just like streamline things or just bring like that happiness in ways that we never would have discovered before. So for me, that's what really drives me, is, being able to bring design as a creative art form into people's lives. I mean, gosh, like everything that you see and touch in this world that is not created by nature, that has been created by a person, like someone had to think about that. And if you're not using a product, it's probably because it wasn't designed well. Like, think about pencils that you use, think about like the microphones that we're speaking into, like so much thought and care had to go into each individual thing, and it improves people's lives. Like, to me, that's huge. And I feel like us as designers, like that's kind of our obligation, is to improve folks lives, basically. But yeah, that's what really like sparks me.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm gonna give you a time machine, and I'm gonna put it. You've heard the podcast before, you know where this is going. I'm gonna give you a time machine, Rachel, and give you the opportunity to talk to yourself as you were starting out, just at the beginning of your career,
oh my god,
or even just before you were starting there, maybe in college still. And you can give yourself any advice. What kind of advice would you give yourself?
oh gosh, okay. First of all, being a Mexican American woman, I can only speak for myself, but this is my experience. I wish I can go back and just tell myself, like, it's okay that you're different. It's okay that you don't look like everybody in the room, or you don't always have a seat at the table. Or, I've been told such contradictory things in my career. I've been told, I'm too intimidating and I need to not speak up as much. I've been told that I'm too quiet and I don't have enough to say. I've been told like so many different things. And for a while there, especially in the beginning of my career, I thought I had to mold myself to be some sort of typecast designer that would fit into a certain like role. And I wish I just told myself back then, like, be yourself. Like, people are going to like you because you're different. People are going to appreciate the designs and the creativity that you bring to the table because you are not the same. And I feel very lucky now that I feel, mature enough in my career that I recognize that like being different is good. Like, you're bringing more equity into this environment, into the design world and my design, a community as well. Like, if people see folks like me who didn't come from an affluent background, who isn't, your typical Silicon Valley like tech bro, then they're going to be inspired and they're going to want to go ahead and take a chance as well. And I think for me, personally, not having that straight line like path, like right out of high school, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I had enough money to go to 4-year college or go to some fancy art school. Like I didn't do those things, and I'm still here. I'm at the table with other folks who have had other journeys as well, which is they're all incredible. But if I could, show folks, either listening or seeing me when I do my random tweets online or see the organizations that I've helped to create and say like, wow, like she did it and she had no idea what she was doing. At least that's what it felt like at the time. Yeah, if I can inspire folks to be that person in that way, that's awesome for me. But yeah, if I can go back into a time machine, I would just say like, screw the haters, do you, be true to yourself.
Screw the haters. Yep, that's great. That's great. I mean, I definitely see that that's, being able to see people from where you're from and be able, like, that's the whole idea for why we do the podcast, by being able to share your stories, be able to share the struggles. I'm going to ask, was there any moment, like you mentioned a couple of things in there, the fact that people told you that you're too quiet or that you're too loud or this or that, but was there any moment that you felt there was a struggle related to the fact of your background, related to the fact that you are Latina, something in that nature that you feel like people didn't understand or culturally didn't fit?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, there have been times where I legitimately at the table, like there's no one else who's come from a background like me, but that's okay. Cause I think it's important to have lots of different folks from lots of different backgrounds having a seat at the table and having those conversations. Being alienated is different. And I have felt that before, but you have to be true to yourself, as I mentioned, and you have to remember that there are other folks like you who are probably looking up to you that you don't even realize. I've had so many mentors before in the past who have been helping me and along my career journey without me even realizing it. And now whenever I chat with my mentees, I tell them, like, someday you're going to do this for somebody else too. And sometimes it's just like being a person that you can relate to, or doing the same path, or, doing the things that you were hoping to do someday. When you're able to see that, it inspires you. And then you want to do it for other people as well. But yeah, there's been tons of times where I've been told, like so many random off-colored things, but you know what, at the beginning of my career, I would say it really affected me. And I thought like, I have to be more like X, Y, and Z to be accepted or to get this job or to get this interview. And I realized, as you find yourself as a designer, as you find yourself as a creative, people love your individuality, and stay true to yourself. If you feel like something is right, stick to it. Persistence pays off. Like, I've been told no so many times at lots of different types of interviews. And Arlen Hamilton, I always like to bring her up because I think it's such a wonderful example. She's the founder of Backstage Capital, and she was actually like a homeless lesbian, like Black woman living in Houston, Texas. And she said she wanted to start a venture capital firm. And she moved to Los Angeles, and she legitimately like lived in LAX. If it was like, I can't remember if it was for weeks or months until she got like her first breakthrough. And one of the things that she said that always stuck out to me is like, it's just a numbers game. Persistence pays off. If you are just true to yourself and you believe in what you're working on, and if you stick to it, like, it's a numbers game. Eventually you're going to get yours. You just have to stick to it. And remember, you're not alone. You have a support system. Yes, we're in a pandemic and it sucks, but you know what? It's also opened so many doors for people to meet virtually as well. Reach out to your online communities, go on Twitter, talk to design folks on there, join Slack groups. You're going to find your people, and you're going to do great.
Yep. Oh, that's awesome. That's a great thing to say. And so do you have any, oh my gosh, I lost track of what we're saying here, Rachel, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Breathe. So I was going to ask you if you had any advice for people starting out, or any advice for anyone that, wish they were in a situation that you're in, and then of course look up to you. We jokingly say, I had someone that was very senior doing an interview, and she said, like, I don't think anyone looks up to me. And I'm like, you're like I look up to you, and it's really hard because it's really hard when you are in a position, maybe you don't see people looking up to you.
Right.
Maybe it's not obvious. So imagine someone that wants to be in that position. Imagine someone that's starting out now, and you're talking to them. What kind of advice can you give them to help them reach their goals in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're somebody starting off, I have a lot of conversations, especially with UX designers who say like, gosh, it feels so oversaturated. Like, is UX design even worth it? Like, should I even get into it? First of all, if your heart's not in it, then like, if your heart's not in anything, don't go for it. Right. Like, that's just it. Like things aren't easy. It's taken me a long time to get to where I am today. And I have so much more learning and growing and evolving to do. Like, I still feel like a noob, in my design career, yet I've been doing it for 10 years. Like, I don't think anyone ever feels like soup. Maybe they do. I don't know. That's a whole nother discussion. But what I'm trying to get at is what I'm trying to get at is, if your heart's truly in it, if you put in the hard work and the effort and you make those connections, like, you're going to be fine. Advice I have to beginners is get real life work under your belt, like, first and foremost. Yes, pro bono efforts stink. People want to get paid, but if you want to build up your portfolio, if you want to really get a foot in the door with interviews, like, you have to have real life work. And that's all there is to it, in my personal opinion. I say reach out, going back to that community aspect, maybe to 3 businesses in your community, a flower shop, your favorite bakery, or whomever, and say, hey, I saw that your website needs some help. Like, could I help you out with that? Or I know how to use, Google's SEO to kind of get you up higher on, this results page. Like, helping local folks, they will appreciate you so much. Then you could put that on your resume and you can say, hey, I've had these results because I was able to, put their website up on, I don't know, Squares, like, whatever it is you want to do. Or like, I did posters for them. They were able to get like 10 more customers in last week. Like, that's legitimate results, right? So I would say, get real life work under your belt. Persistence pays off. Constantly be learning. There are amazing, amazing networks online and so many free tools. Like, oh my gosh, if I knew what I know now, like 10 years ago, none of this existed online. Like, you can legitimately learn how to code for free on Codecademy. There are so many amazing Medium articles. Figma has like basics. When you download their Figma, like, I think you get a free trial or something, and it just teaches you like the basics, and a plethora of YouTube videos. Just stick to it. Find your niche, talk to people. So many amazing Slack communities. Some I can think of off the top of my head, like Product Tribes is a really good one. I believe there's a Latinx Design Slack group as well. That's run by Pablo Stanley, I believe. And there are, like, I'm in the Los Angeles area. There's a Los Angeles Design and Development community. Guaranteed, wherever you're living, there's probably a community in a major city nearby that has to do with UX design or design in general. Like, go on there, have conversations, meet people, have coffee chats. You're going to be fine. Get out there and do you, stay true to yourself.
Thank you. That was so good. Thank you for that.
For sure.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time and having a chat with me today and sharing your story, Rachel. Thanks for this, and good luck with the. Kids coming in 3 weeks. You said.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm a chaotic person. I'm like starting a new job and like having a baby all in like a span of a few months. Thank you. And also, I just want to say thank you to you, Michelle, for having this space for us. There's so many different types of Latinx people from all over the globe, and to be able to have like this design space to just talk about our different experiences is just absolutely incredible. We all come from different backgrounds. My last name is like Smith, but I'm Mexican American. So being able to like represent people like me, people from different parts of the world, and just have this this space to be able to do that is really wonderful. So thank you so much for inviting me on here, and yeah, this has been wonderful.
It was a great pleasure. I have one anecdote for you. Did you know that my last name and your last name are actually the same?
Oh, really?
Ferreira is actually blacksmith, which then got translated to Smith. Oh yeah.
Oh, that's so
it's
funny.
Really funny how those things go.
I love it. My mom's maiden name is Lopez. I always joke it's like the Mexican Smith. So it is what it is.
It is. Well, thank you again, Rachel. And then here we cut.
Hey, I almost forgot. If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe. Also, rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Thank you.